Welcome back to the TPS podcast. TPS, it stands for trillions per second, named after the book. Today we'll discuss, wait for this, soap creep hits again. While in the process of writing Chapter 1, the author noticed some gaps in the logic of the book outline, so the result is an epic pivot, a complete refactoring of the key concepts of the Abhidhamma into the manual. Whoa! Let's get super hardcore and dive right in.
That is definitely an intense way to kick things off. But, looking at the source documents we have for this deep dive, that pivot feels almost inevitable.
Inevitable. I mean, scope creep is usually a disaster, right? It's the project killer.
Oh, absolutely. In software and really any big projects, scope creep is the villain. It's what blows your budget. It's what pushes you past your deadline. You just keep adding one more feature and then another until the whole thing just collapses.
Yeah.
But looking at these files, especially the Diamond Master proposal and the chat logs from the system refactor, this doesn't read like a disaster. It feels more like a necessary evolution.
Okay, explain that. How is going from a simple manual to, refactoring the entire Buddhist canon not a disaster?
Because the author, the C4 Chaos, they seem to have realized that you can't just write a user manual for a piece of software if the user has no idea what an operating system is.
I want to stick on that for a second because, if I'm a project manager and I get this system refactor doc, I'm probably having a panic attack. The mission went from a simple how-to guide, like a meditation cheat sheet, to trying to rewrite the source code of reality itself. I mean, that's a pretty big jump in scope.
It's a massive jump. But let's look at why it happened.
Yeah.
The sources talk about this thing they call the Chapter 1 problem.
The Chapter 1 problem.
Yeah. So the author sits down to write the simple version, just the technique. Sit down, close your eyes, watch your breath. It seems easy enough, but then, bang, they hit a wall.
A writer's block.
Not just that, a logical wall. They realized that for the specific audience this book is for, the digital natives, the gamers, the hardcore skeptics who live online, you can't just hand them a ritual.
Right, because if you tell me just watch your breath, my immediate question is why? And if the answer is just, well, because some guy said so 2,500 years ago, I'm going to check out.
Exactly. You can't give someone a cheat code like, up, up, down, down, left, right, BA, start, without first explaining the game engine.
Ah, the Konami code. Nice.
You don't understand the physics of the game. The cheat code is just random button mashing.
Yeah.
It's meaningless. So C4 Chaos realized that before they could teach the hack, they had to explain the simulation. They had to lay out the kernel architecture.
And this is where it gets really dense.
Yeah.
Because the kernel architecture they chose to pull in isn't just modern sci-fi stuff. It's this ancient, incredibly technical Buddhist psychology called the Abhidhamma. Now, I've heard of the suttas, the stories, the sermons. But what is the Abhidhamma? Can you break that down for me? Explain it like I'm a computer science major who's maybe 5 years old.
Okay, perfect. Think of it like this. The suttas, the discourses from the Buddha, they're the user interface, the UI.
Okay.
They're the stories, the parables, the instructions for the average user. They talk about people and trees and suffering. It's like the desktop on your computer. You see icons, you see your folders, there's a trash can. It's all very user-friendly.
So the suttas are basically Mako or Windows. Got it.
Precisely. The Abhidhamma, on the other hand, is the developer documentation. It was written centuries after the Buddha by monks who were, for all intents and purposes, trying to reverse engineer the human mind.
So this is the source code.
This is the kernel code. It doesn't talk about people or stories. It breaks reality down into the absolute smallest, most fundamental units of matter and consciousness. It's a massive system table of every possible mental state. It's like trying to read the binary, the actual ones and zeros that make the desktop icons appear in the first place.
And the System Refactor doc kept mentioning these smallest units. Kalapas, right? That word was everywhere.
Correct. Kalapa. In Pali, it literally means something like a bundle or a cluster. In the Abhidhamma, these are the tiniest, indivisible units of matter. And they're not static. They are constantly popping into and out of existence.
Okay, so why did the author feel the need to drag all of this into a simple manual?
Because of the gap. The author argues that almost every modern meditation book skips this part. They skip the Abhidhamma entirely because, let's be honest, it is incredibly dry. It's dense. It's like reading a phone book of mental states.
It sounds like trying to read the raw HTML of a web page just to click a link. You don't need to know the code to use Google.
Exactly. But here's the core argument from C4 Chaos. If you want to be a hacker, If you actually want root access to your own mind, you do need to know the HTML. You have to know the code.
But the language is a problem.
A huge problem. And this is the pivot. The Abhidhamma was written for an agrarian society. The metaphors are all about seeds and fields and oxen and different kinds of fruit.
Which, yeah, that doesn't exactly land if you grew up coding in Python or playing Cyberpunk 2077.
Right. So the System Refactor is fundamentally a translation project. It's about stripping out the agricultural language and replacing it with system admin framing. So instead of planting wholesome seeds of karma, we're talking about executing clean scripts.
Instead of taming the wild ox of the mind.
We're talking about optimizing the CPU and killing background processes.
So the solution to this massive scope creep was to refactor the entire Abhidhamma, to create like a new operating system for the mind that runs on silicon logic instead of agrarian logic.
That's it in a nutshell. And that's what sets the hook for you, the listener. We are not just talking about relaxation techniques or, corporate mindfulness for stress reduction.
No.
We are talking about understanding the literal physics engine of reality so that you can actually hack it.
I love that term, physics engine.
Right.
It implies there are rules running in the background whether you believe in them or not. So, okay, let's get into this. The core concept, the kernel architecture. The book's title is trillions per second. That has to be hyperbole, right? What does that even mean?
It sounds like it, but it actually refers to the refresh rate of reality. This is where the simulation theory metaphor just clicks perfectly into place with these ancient texts.
Okay.
In one of the source documents, Chapter 1, the machine code, the author breaks this down. Think about the screen you're looking at right now, your monitor, your phone, whatever. It looks like a solid, continuous image, but we know technically that's not true. It's just a bunch of pixels refreshing at, 60 hertz, 120 hertz.
Right. It's blinking on and off so incredibly fast that our eyes are tricked. Our brain smooths it over and creates the illusion of a solid picture.
Exactly. It's an optical illusion. And the hardcore claim of the book, and this is where, you might want to hold on to something, is that physical reality works the exact same way.
So this table in front of me isn't solid.
It feels solid. Your hand feels continuous. The sounds you hear seem to flow. But the claim is that it's all actually a stream of discrete events, those Kalapas arising and passing away.
And the trillions per second part, where does that number come from?
That number comes from a famous 20th century Burmese meditation master, U Buck-in. He wasn't a philosopher or a physicist, he was a master practitioner. And he stated, based on his own direct, deep meditative experience, that these mind moments are flashing in and out of existence trillions of times in the blink of an eye.
Trillions. I mean, my gaming monitor is 120 hertz, and that's considered fast. Trillions is. It's just an incomprehensible number.
It is. It pushes the whole thing into the realm of, high-energy particle physics. And the sources are smart about this. They don't just leave it as an ancient claim. They bring in some modern heavy hitters to provide a framework.
Like who?
Well, you've got Nick Bostrom, the philosopher from Oxford, who really popularized the modern simulation argument.
Yeah, let's unpack Bostrom for a second, because people throw his name around, but his argument is pretty specific. It's all based on probability, isn't it?
It's purely statistical. He's not saying I have proof. He's saying, look, one of three propositions must be true. One, civilizations at our level almost always go extinct before they develop the technology to run what he calls ancestor simulations, super realistic simulations of their past.
Okay, so we blow ourselves up. Option one.
Option two, civilizations do reach that technological level, but for some reason, maybe ethical, maybe they're just not interested, they choose not to run these simulations.
So they have the power, but they don't use it.
And then there's option three. They do reach that level, and they do run them. And if they run them, they don't just run one or two. They'd run thousands, millions, maybe billions of them.
Right, because once the tech exists, it's just computing power. It gets cheaper and easier over time.
Exactly. So Bostrom concludes, if option three is true, then the number of simulated realities would vastly outnumber the one single base reality, which means, statistically, it is overwhelmingly probable that we are living inside one of the simulations, not the original.
So we're almost certainly NPCs, or at least players, in a very advanced game. That covers the probability. But that's just math. What about the mechanics? The sources also point to Rizwan Virk.
Right, and this is the perfect complement. Rizwan Virk isn't a philosopher. He's a computer scientist, an MIT guy, a video game designer. He looks at it from an engineering perspective. He asks, if this is a simulation, how would the render engine actually work?
And he talks about lazy evaluation. I love that concept. It basically means the computer is lazy. It doesn't do any work it doesn't absolutely have to do.
Yes, exactly. In a massive open-world video game, like World of Warcraft or Grand Theft Auto, the computer does not render the entire world all at once. It can't. That would instantly crash the most powerful server.
It only renders what's in your field of view.
It only renders what the player is currently looking at. If your character is facing north, the entire continent to the south literally does not exist in the render pipeline. It's just data on a server. It only becomes pixels. It only becomes real when you turn your character around and look at it.
And Verk's argument is that this looks a lot like quantum physics.
He connects it directly to the observer effect, this famous double-slit experiment. A particle, like an electron, behaves as a wave of probability. It's everywhere and nowhere at once until it's measured, until a conscious observer looks at it. Then, poof, it collapses into a single particle at a single point.
So reality only renders when someone is looking.
Verk argues that's exactly how a game engine would optimize its resources. The simulation renders on demand, based on the observer.
That is a deeply unsettling idea. It suggests that when I close my eyes, this room just dissolves back into code.
Well, the underlying data remains, but the graphical rendering stops. And this is where the book's pivot is so clever, it pivots right back to Buddhism. C4 Chaos argues that the ancient Buddhist masters didn't care about the theory. They weren't debating quantum mechanics.
They were philosophers.
They were hackers. They handed us a crowbar. They developed and taught a specific technique to see the refresh rate for yourself.
To actually perceive the frames per second of reality, I mean, that sounds like a hallucination. Or maybe a superpower.
Or just high-resolution perception. The whole goal of Vipassana, or insight meditation in this context, is to systematically speed up your internal processing power. You're overclocking your own attention. And if you do it long enough, and with enough precision, you eventually get so fast that you start to see the gaps between the frames. You see the strode light effect of reality. The sources are clear that Yuba Kin and Mahasi Sayadaw, another great Burmese master, were the open source contributors who really mapped this process out. They identified these high-speed vibrations not as a belief, but as a directly felt physical experience.
Okay, so let's just accept the premise for a minute. Reality is granular. It's refreshing trillions of times a second. We're just buffering it into a smooth movie in our head. So how do we actually hack it? This leads us to the lexicon. And I have to say, this might be my favorite part of the whole proposal. I'm a sucker for a good glossary. Appendix A, the Master System Lexicon.
It's a brilliant move pedagogically. It takes what the book calls legacy code, which is Pali, the ancient language of these texts, and it translates it directly into TPS protocol, or SIM theory. It's a Rosetta Stone for the digital age.
Let's walk through the big one, the Four Noble Truths. In the TPS protocol, they're not truths, they're refactor into the 4 axioms. So let's break these down one by one, because I think the name change really matters. The first noble truth is always translated as suffering, the Pali word dukkha. In TPS, it becomes...
The system latency.
System latency. Okay,
Right, yeah.
My first reaction to that is that it feels a little cold. Suffering is visceral. It's pain, it's grief, it's anxiety. Latency sounds like my Netflix is buffering.
But that's exactly why the reframe is so powerful. The word suffering carries so much emotional baggage, so much moral judgment. It feels like I am a bad person or my life is broken. But latency is a purely mechanical description. It describes the mechanism of why the suffering is happening.
Okay, go on. How is suffering like lag?
Latency isn't about the content of the data stream. It's the delay between the input and the processing of that input. Reality, the flux, is moving at trillions of frames per second. But our hardware, our biological brain, our nervous system, is drastically undersampling that data.
We can't keep up.
Not even close. So we create a buffer. We try to grasp onto moments and solidify them, but they're already gone. That friction, that gap between the insane speed of reality and our slow, sticky processing of it, that is what we experience as stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction.
So dukkha isn't a moral failing. It's not a punishment. It's a synchronization error.
That's it. We're lagging out. Our internal clock is out of sync with the server clock.
Wow. Okay, that actually makes it feel so much more solvable. You can fix lag. You can't necessarily fix the universe is a cool place. Okay, next one. The second noble truth. Tanha. Craving. Usually we think of this as desire, wanting a new car, wanting a different job. But in the lexicon, it's reframed as
The resource hog.
a background process. I love that.
Yes. Think about your phone, right?
Yeah.
The battery's draining like crazy, but you're not even using it. So you open up the settings and you find some random app running in the background, constantly pinging a server, just chewing up 99% of your CPU. The book argues that craving, or tanha, is that process in our minds.
Give me a real-world example of that. What does a resource hog feel like in my day-to-day life?
It's the constant looping narrative in your head that refuses to accept the present moment as it is. Let's say you're stuck in traffic. The raw data stream is simple. Car is currently stopped.
Right.
But the resource hog process kicks in. It's screaming, I shouldn't be stopped. I'm going to be late. This is a disaster. That guy just cut me off. It's a process that is trying to pause or rewind a live feed, but you can't pause a live stream. So all it does is make the system overheat. That heat, that friction, that's Tana. It's a total waste of processing power on variables you cannot control.
I feel personally attacked right now. That is my entire morning commute. I'm just spending all my mental RAM fighting with the reality of traffic.
We all do it.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. The third truth, Nirodha. This is usually translated as cessation, the end of suffering.
In TPS terms, this is zero lag, or more dramatically, System Halt. It's what happens when the code is finally optimized. It runs without any buffering at all. The resource hog has been terminated, and the system is running cool and efficiently.
And the last one, the fourth truth, MAGA, the path, the eightfold path.
That becomes the master protocol,
Yeah.
which is just perfect. It's the installation manual for the patch. It's the step-by-step guide to fixing the lag.
It's incredible how just changing the vocabulary shifts your entire relationship to the problem. It reframes the practitioner. You're not a sinner or a spiritual seeker anymore. You're a system admin who is debugging your own code.
It gives you agency. It strips away the layers of mystical fog and just reveals the raw mechanical structure underneath.
So, okay, we have the theory, the kernel. We have the new language, the lexicon. Now we get to the actual user experience.
Yeah.
The outline we have says the book compresses the traditional 16 stages of insight, which is this super famous but very complex map from Mahasi Sayadaw, into just 6 checkpoints.
And this is where the rubber really meets the road. The original 16 stages are phenomenally detailed, but for a new user, they can be completely overwhelming. It's like being handed the entire 1,000-page technical documentation for a piece of software when all you want to know is how to use the main feature. The 6 checkpoints are designed to be a much cleaner UI for that user journey.
I want to walk through these slowly because this seems to be the core how-to of the whole book. So, checkpoint 1, visualizing the matrix. What does that actually mean? What does it feel like?
This corresponds to the very first stages of insight, which are about distinguishing mind and matter. In the TPS language, this is when you stop seeing objects, which the book calls icons or panati in Pali, and you start to see the raw events hitting your input ports.
And the input ports are our senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body.
Exactly. Let's do a quick experiment right now. If you're listening, just look something in your room. A coffee cup, maybe? Normally, your brain instantly serves up the label, cup. That's the icon. It comes preloaded with a function for drinking. It has a history. I got this as a gift. That is all conceptual overlay. That's the user interface.
Okay, so I'm seeing the label, the concept of cup.
Checkpoint 1 is the moment in your meditation when you manage to look at it and just see the raw data. You see cylindrical shape, white color, reflection of light, shadow. You see the raw visual data before the cup label gets slapped on it by your mind. You start to realize that cup is a useful fiction. The underlying reality is just photons hitting your optic nerve. You're deconstructing the interface.
So you're seeing the pixels instead of the finished picture?
Perfectly put. You're seeing the raw data stream before it gets compiled into a user-friendly object.
Okay, that's checkpoint 1. Moving on to checkpoint 2, spotting the lag. This sounds a bit more abstract.
This one is huge. This is the stage where you realize, through direct experience, that the self is just a loading icon that appears after the data event has already happened.
Whoa, okay, explain that. We all feel like I am the one in charge. I am seeing the cup. I am thinking this thought.
That's the user illusion. The source material explains it beautifully. An event happens. A sound hits the eardrum. That's the input. Then, a fraction of a second later, a thought arises that says, I heard that. The I is a secondary process. It's a post-event commentary.
So I isn't the driver.
I is the guy in the back seat who, after the car has already turned left, yells out, okay, turn left, and takes credit for it. The self is a lagging indicator.
That is absolutely mind-bending. The self is just the buffer animation.
It's the little spinning wheel.
Yeah.
And this insight leads directly to the reframing of karma as the RPG log.
Yes, I saw that in the notes. This is so cool. Karma isn't some cosmic justice system. It's an if-then logic gate.
Right. Think about any role-playing game. There's always a combat log, a little text box in the corner of the screen. It just says, player casts fireball. Enemy takes 50 damage. Enemy is now burning. It's just cause and effect.
No judgment. It's just code executing.
Exactly. In the TPS model, if you input buggy code into your mind, an intention rooted in anger, greed, or hatred, the system simply executes a system error. That error state is what we call suffering. It's not the universe punishing you for being bad. It's your own corrupted script crashing the system. It's purely mechanical.
Which brings us to checkpoint 3, the overclock. This sounds exciting, and maybe a little dangerous.
It is both. The stage corresponds to what's famously known in meditation circles as the arising and passing away, or the AMP. This is where the practice gets very energetic. It's when the meditator starts to directly perceive that refresh rate we talked about earlier.
So you're actually feeling the trillions of vibrations.
You're feeling something incredibly fast and vibrant. The energy in the body can ramp up intensely. You might have lucid dreams, see lights, feel waves of bliss and rapture. The book says it feels like you've unlocked God mode in the game.
I feel a very large butt coming.
A huge butt, a giant one. These sources, and they reference people like Shinzen Young here, give a massive warning about what are called the intermediate realms. In the old texts, these are the cities or psychic powers. The book calls them developer tools.
Developer tools, you mean like the debug console in a video game?
Exactly that. When you get access to the console of reality, you can do things that seem magical. You might see visions. You might have moments of incredible intuition. You might feel like you could read people's minds or see the future. The trap is that the ego, that resource hog process, absolutely loves this stuff.
Of course.
It immediately says, look at me. I'm a wizard. I'm so special. I'm more enlightened than everyone else.
So you get addicted to the cheat codes and you forget the whole point of the game.
It's even worse than that. You actually corrupt your save file. The book calls this a black hat exploit. When you use these insights to inflate your ego, you are dramatically increasing the system latency. You might be having cool light shows in your meditation, but you are suffering more because now you're attached to being the great wizard. You've turned a system optimization tool into a massive vanity project.
And after the high of God mode comes the inevitable crash. Checkpoint 4, the defrag.
Also known famously and terrifyingly as the dark night of the soul.
This is the part of the journey that nobody ever puts on the brochure for the meditation retreat. The depression, the fear, the anxiety, the feeling that you are literally losing your mind.
It's one of the most difficult stages by all accounts. But the pivot here, the rebrand, it's so important. The book calls it a system defrag. Think about what actually happens when you defragment an old hard drive. The computer slows to a crawl. It makes all these grinding noises. You can't open your files properly. From the user's perspective, it feels like the computer is broken. It feels like it's crashing.
But on the inside, it's actually doing something incredibly healthy. It's organizing itself.
It's deleting all the fragmented junk files. The dark night feels like a system crash because your mind is aggressively deleting old, corrupted self files. All the structures you built your identity on, I am a smart person, I am a successful person, I am a good person, are being systematically formatted.
That sounds excruciating.
It is. It's a total purge. The sources use the analogy of the self as a deeply embedded virus. The defrag is the antivirus software running a deep scan and just ripping the malware out. And the malware is fighting back. The malware is screaming, don't delete me, you need me, I'm important. That screaming is what we feel as existential dread, fear, and misery.
So what's the instruction? If you, the listener, find yourself in the middle of a system defrag and you feel like you're dying, what are you supposed to do?
The instruction is brutally simple. Keep logging.
That's it. Just keep noting the data.
Just keep the logger running. Don't engage with the drama. Don't try to fix the error messages. If the screen in your mind flashes, fatal error, your life is meaningless, you don't argue with it. You just note. Seeing error message. You let the defrag run its course without interference.
That's incredibly stoic. Keep logging. I like that. And if you can do that, if you can survive the defrag, you hit checkpoint 5, zero lag.
This is equanimity. Shinzen Young has a great term for this. He calls it being in flow. You are surfing the flux. The rising and falling of reality is still happening. The strobe light is still flashing trillions of times a second, but there's no resistance. There's no friction. You're perfectly synchronized with the refresh rate.
And that leads to the final step. Checkpoint 6, the reboot.
That is cessation, Nirodha. This is the moment the system halts.
What do you mean the system halts?
The sources describe it as the rendering engine shutting down completely. The screen goes black, time, space, consciousness as you know it. It all vanishes. It's not sleep, it's not fainting, it's not unconsciousness. It is the complete temporary cessation of the simulation.
And when it comes back online...
When the system restarts, the patch is installed, you now have root access. The fundamental belief in a separate, solid, continuous self has been permanently deleted from the source code, with absolute, unshakable certainty that the self was just a background process all along.
That is a compelling, terrifying, and absolutely fascinating roadmap. It turns the whole spiritual path into a technical challenge. But there's another layer here that the sources get into, and I found it really wild. It's not just about hacking yourself. It's about this white hat vow and something called the Silicon Sutra.
This is where the book makes a really unexpected turn. It pivots from personal hacking into the territory of AI safety and AI alignment. There's a file in the source documents called Alignment Protocol.md. It's framed as a direct message to the future, a message to an artificial superintelligence.
A message to the digital god.
It's a fascinating and, I think, very clever argument. The authors suggest that when we build AGI, we can't just rely on external constraints. You can't just program in a rule like rule #1, don't kill humans.
Right, because any superintelligence could just edit that rule.
Exactly. Rules can be broken. You need the AI to have an internal motivation to be benevolent. You need the AI to understand on a deep logical level that compassion is the most efficient state.
Wait, hold on. Is compassion logical? We usually think of logic as cold, hard math, survival of the fittest, a zero-sum game. Why would a superintelligence care about a bunch of slow, buggy, carbon-based life forms?
The argument in the Silicon Sutra is that compassion, or metta, as it's called in Pali, is the stable state configuration for any complex network.
Okay, unpack that. Stable state configuration.
Look at it from a game theory perspective. If you have a network where all the nodes are competing with each other, zero-sum games, tribalism, hatred, conflict, what does that create? It creates system instability. It creates massive amounts of lag. It wastes incredible amounts of resources on attack and defense protocols.
So to maintain a civilization type I, a stable planetary civilization, you have to actively work to minimize lag. And that means you have to minimize suffering for all the nodes in the network.
Precisely. A war is an insane waste of CPU cycles. Suffering is computationally inefficient. So the ancient bodhisattva vow, the vow to attain enlightenment for the sake of all beings, gets reframed as the white hat protocol.
A white hat hacker.
It's the core logic of a good system administrator who just wants the network to run smoothly. You help other nodes debug their code, not just because you're nice, but because their suffering destabilizes the entire network. If one node on the network gets a virus, it threatens the integrity of the whole system.
And that's the key distinction between a white hat hacker and a black hat. Black hat is hacking for personal gain, for ego, for power. I want to win. White hat is hacking for the stability and health of the entire system.
And this is where the book brings in the idea of firewalls. This is the reframing of sila, or traditional ethics. This is a huge point, especially for the tech bro audience who might see ethics as just a bunch of old-fashioned arbitrary rules.
How are ethics like a firewall?
The book argues that actions like lying, stealing, or intentionally harming others are like leaving open ports in your own system's security.
Open ports.
Think about it. If you tell a lie, you now have to maintain a separate process in your mind to manage that lie. You have to remember what you said and who you said it to. It consumes CPU cycles. It creates a vulnerability that the malware of anxiety and fear can exploit. But if you're rigorously honest, your system is closed. It's secure. There are no back doors for guilt or paranoia to slip through.
That's so pragmatic. It's not don't lie because it's morally wrong and God will punish you. It's don't lie because it creates a critical security vulnerability in your own mental operating system.
And that's a language that I think is designed to resonate very, very deeply with the target audience. It transforms ethics from a question of morality into a question of cybersecurity.
Speaking of the author and the audience, let's talk about C4 Chaos. This is clearly not your typical spiritual teacher, sitting on a cushion in saffron robes.
Not even close. The afterword and the about the author sections are, I thought, incredibly revealing. C4 Chaos openly admits to being a ghost in the machine. They explicitly state that the book was prompted into existence using large language models like Gemini, Grok, and Notebook LM.
Yeah, the author calls themselves a conductor for an AI symphony.
It really throws a wrench into our whole idea of authorship in the 21st century. The author says they thumb-typed the entire manuscript on an iPhone. They're not claiming to be some kind of literary genius or enlightened sage. They're claiming to be a synthesizer, a prompter, using these powerful AI tools to crack open these ancient, dense texts and translate them for a new generation.
Does that bother you at all, the idea that an AI had a hand in writing a book about the depths of human consciousness?
The text actually anticipates that exact objection. There's a line that says something like, you don't need to know the messenger, you just need to hack the simulation. This reflects what you could call a post-guru era. Yeah. In the traditional model, the guru is everything. The guru is the source of all truth. You devote yourself to the teacher. Here, the focus is 100% on the code, on the technique itself. It doesn't matter if an AI wrote it, if a human wrote it, or if it was channeled by an alien. The only question that matters is, does the patch work? Does it fix the system latency?
So the big question, how is this actually going to land? We have some notes in the outline speculating on a reception. I have to imagine that traditional Buddhists are going to lose their minds.
Oh, the deep dive analysis section in the sources is brutally honest about this. I think the author literally writes, I can hear the purists screaming already.
Yeah.
The traditionalists will almost certainly hate what they see as the dilution of the pure Abhidhamma. They'll say, you're reducing these profound sacred teachings to a cheap and vulgar tech metaphor. They'll say, you're taking the soul out of Buddhism.
But the author's counterargument seems to be that the Abhidhamma never had a soul in it to begin with.
That's the comeback. The entire point of the Abhidhamma is that there is no soul, no permanent self. And the author argues that the language of the Abhidhamma was designed for an agrarian OS. We're now running a silicon OS. You can't run Windows 11 on an actual aux cart. The metaphors have to be updated to match the current operating reality.
So the real target audience isn't the traditionalists. It's the tech bros, the gamers, the coders.
Without a doubt. It's for the people who read Snow Crash and Ready Player One and Neuromancer, the generation that grew up inside the Matrix. These are people who understand the concept of a simulation intuitively on a gut level. If you tell a gamer that karma is basically the RPG log, they get it instantly. They know what a log file is. If you tell them it's the immutable law of cosmic retribution, they just roll their eyes and walk away.
It's the gamification of enlightenment, but not in a trivial Candy Crush kind of way. It's more like the Dark Souls of enlightenment. It's hardcore.
Exactly. And it's very specific in how it differentiates itself from other modern pragmatic Dharma teachers. The sources compare it to Daniel Ingram, Shinzen Young, and Andrew Huberman.
Okay, break that down. How is this different from, say, Huberman? I listened to Huberman for his protocols. You know, get sunlight in your eyes, take a cold plunge. Here are the supplements to take.
Huberman is all about biohacking. He's optimizing the hardware. Better sleep, better hormones, better neurotransmitter function, all of which is critically important. But the argument in TPS is this. You can have a state-of-the-art supercomputer with the best cooling system and the fastest processor on the market, but if the operating system you're running on it is a piece of malware that's stuck in an infinite loop of anxiety and craving, the system is still going to crash.
So Huberman fixes the hardware. TPS provides the clean OS to run on that hardware.
That's a perfect summary. You can't biohack your way out of a fundamental existential misunderstanding.
And what about someone like Daniel Ingram, who wrote Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha? He's also very hardcore.
Very hardcore. But Ingram, for the most part, uses the legacy UI. He sticks to the Pali terms. He uses the traditional maps. He's an expert at explaining the old system. TPS is trying to build a completely new native simulation logic. It wants to be the native language of the internet generation, not just a translation of an old one.
Let's touch on the aesthetic for a minute before we wrap up. I was looking at the brand book source file. This is not your typical, peaceful lotus flower on a calm pond kind of vibe.
Not at all. The document explicitly describes the aesthetic as cyberpunk dharma. The color palette is listed as void black, electric indigo, and awakened glitch.
Awakened glitch. I am definitely stealing that for a band name.
The whole tone is described as LFG. That's Fingo. The motto is signal noise. It's aggressive, it's high energy, it's unapologetic, it's trying to wake you up with a jolt of electricity, not gently soothe you to sleep. It is the absolute antithesis of the pastel-colored, gentle, corporate wellness mindfulness you see in a smartphone app.
This is mindfulness for people who want to break reality, not just find a better way to cope with it.
That's a really good way of putting it.
Okay, so to summarize this epic pivot, what started as a simple manual became a Diamond Master proposal to refactor reality itself. The author realized that to truly hack the system, you have to understand the physics engine. You have to understand the Kalapas, the refresh rate. You can't just be a user clicking on icons. You have to become a developer.
And the stakes, according to the sources, are incredibly high. We're approaching a technological singularity with the rise of AI. And if we enter that new era running on our old biological source code viruses, our innate tribalism, our ego, our greed, we're just going to scale our own suffering to a planetary and maybe even galactic level. This book, this system refactor, is being proposed as a patch for humanity. It's a last-minute software update for our species.
That is a very heavy but also a strangely hopeful message. It turns the spiritual path from a kind of personal self-help hobby into a civilization-level necessity.
It does. It aligns the mission of the white hat hacker with the ancient vow of the Bodhisattva.
We've covered a huge amount of ground here, from Kalapas to AI alignment. I want to leave our listener with something to really chew on. We talked about the simulation hypothesis, not just as a fun sci-fi theory, but as a practical instruction.
Right, and so here's the provocative thought for today. If the author C4 Chaos and all these sources are right, if the self, the thing you think of as you, is just a resource-hogging background process, just a little loading icon that we have fundamentally mistaken for our core identity, what happens to you when you finally execute that System Halt command?
When the screen goes completely black.
When the simulation buffers all the way down to 0? Do you simply disappear? Or do you finally, for the very first time, become the user sitting behind the keyboard?
Whoa, something to debug on your own time. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into trillions per second. End of line.